Just last week, I was at a conference in Sydney. There were approximately 550 people, all focused on graduate development. I arrived at the gala dinner being someone who really enjoys interacting with people, meeting new people, and I was overwhelmed. There were bright lights, music was fairly loud in the background, and the noise of the chit-chat of people chatting, discussing, meeting each other was overwhelming. Now, this was my experience as someone who is fairly extroverted and really enjoys interacting. And I potentially made that connection point to being in a state of sensory overload because of my partner. My partner works for Autism Australia, teaching children with autism. So very often at home, we find ourselves discussing different elements of creating neurodiverse learning environments. So when I think about how we do that in these environments digitally, but even when we're in person, we have to make certain concessions. We have to make certain design choices to make sure all learners are being spoken to. So before we get into the solutions, let's start with what are the pain points that people are feeling when they are approaching learning from a neurodiverse standpoint. All of us, but more so for people with neurodiversity, are going to experience screen fatigue. This is going to happen when we have long periods of time that we are in a singular space digitally. This is going to be something we can really design and deliver in a certain way that overcomes it, but this is something we have to be aware of. Screen fatigue is real, and it is even more prevalent for people who are neurodiverse. When I spoke of sensory overload, that is something that is going to happen with people who are neurodiverse in learning situations as well. So it is harder to cut out background noise, to try to focus on an individual who is speaking. So being cognizant of that is important. And then there's the notion of multitasking, and how much of that is real and how much is fabricated is really up to the individual. But this idea of multitasking is one that nobody's great at, and there are just varying levels of acceptance or being able to get enough done to show that you are multitasking. Likely you're getting many things done poorly. So multitasking is something we shouldn't expect of others and can overload certain people. And finally, technology. So how are we creating spaces that feel safe for everyone involved? So now thinking about being more solution oriented, we want to create environments that are going to allow people to learn and learn really successfully. And so that is going to transfer over into this medium as much as it needs to be considered in a physical space. Keeping to time is something that is very important. But not only does keeping to time allow neurodiverse learners to stay on track, but also having frequent short breaks. It is the extended periods of time that we are in a singular space, whether it be digital or in person, that can be really confronting for people. Having those breaks allows all of us, but especially neurodiverse learners, to process the information they're taking on, either from you as the speaker or from their peers. We also want to continue to frame and reframe content. So how do we summarize and not assume that everybody's taking in that knowledge? It allows everybody to get up to speed in certain key stage gates during a learning engagement, and that allows people to all move through as one. We want to use multimedia tools. So how are we dipping in and out of facilitated sessions and polls and videos? How are we ensuring that chat is a function that is supporting learning and not distracting learning? Those are elements that are really important. And then finally, we want to speak in plain English. When we approach certain topics, there can be a lot of acronyms that are used, more complicated or complex language that is used. As much as we can revert back to plain English and summarize in plain English, that's going to allow everybody to stay on track. The final thing I will say, especially as we're on a video that is very much coming to you through a screen, is providing a no screen option. So many of our workplaces rely on us having cameras on, and although we will advocate for that within the Colin James Method whenever we can, we also want to allow for people that need an audio only option at times. This allows for a safe space for all learners and empowers people to make the choice that's right for them. I hope this is helpful in creating a neurodiverse environment for all individuals in your workplace or in workplaces that you tune into. Depending on your location, there are definitely tools that you can use and groups that can support. Here in Australia, we have a company or an organization called Autism Australia, or Aspect, and they do consult with organizations big and small to make sure that you are creating safe environments for learning and safe environments for coming together, connecting with your teams. So I do encourage you to use all the resources you have available when you're planning your next learning event or your next get-together. Best of luck.